This is Jacob from Dragonbastard Games. I'm taking a brief break from campaign logs for a minute. I just wanted to focus on puzzles first. I did some fun ones that I'm honestly pretty proud of that I want to talk about in more detail. I wanted to do this video earlier, but it presented some complications. Puzzles are one of my biggest struggles. If puzzles are challenging, players might never solve them. Some puzzles only one player can try, and other players may be bored. Easy puzzles feel pointless, and if the puzzle isn't solved by the player, but rather by a die roll, it's less a puzzle and more an obstacle. I don't find rolling to solve a puzzle particularly fun. Maybe rolling for a hint is fine, but still. One of the most important things with puzzles is to know your players. It may take some trial and error to determine, but one group may really enjoy decoding things, but another may find even the simplest codes wildly unnecessary. For my group, I've learned that even if the spies would certainly use more in-depth encryption than this, it may be best just to sub in a few words to avoid saying the name of an important group, or an encoded message may have a simple Caesar shift. That is, a direct replacement of letters, generally based on shifting all letters some number to the left or right in the alphabet. These are easy. They don't need a key, and they can be satisfying for players. The one I used for my group, they started, poked at for a few days, and then put it down. Not something I can rely on my group solving in a session. A few weeks later, the player suddenly came to me. I've got it! That works for me. It also tells me I definitely don't want anything more complicated, and to be honest, probably less complicated is better. It was fun, but I won't use it too often, mostly reserving it for intercepted messages from spies. When playing with this kind of puzzle, keep in mind things like comprehend languages, tongues, or straight intelligence checks may try to substitute for players actually solving it. I have mixed feelings on how these should work, but you should have considered that before putting this kind of puzzle in front of your players. For me, although this message worked, in the future I'm going to avoid encoding and just go with cryptic substitutions of words or abbreviations. Notes are fun. I highly recommend anytime you're doing anything like this to hand out physical notes to your players. In general with puzzles, I recommend physical representations. It's hard to explain something puzzling in enough detail to seem fair to the players. I threw together a few puzzles for my most recent dungeon. A small tower basement really, but it had the vibe of a dungeon. This was the first dungeon-y thing for this particular group, and so I kind of peppered them with a series of puzzles. The first, a series of switches. I like this one a lot. It's pretty simple. Players might get frustrated with it, but can learn from other players' attempts. My implementation was super simple. I'm going to put a little image of it somewhere here-ish. It's a little stainless steel mint box that I coated in paper, so it doesn't look like a branded object. I drew on the path of each switch, so it's clear that there are 3 positions. I then added these little magnet thumbtacks. It's a really clear analog to what the switch positions might be in the game. They slide really smoothly across the surface with the paper between the magnet and the metal, so even just moving them around is fun. If you want those thumbtacks, there's a link in the doobly-doo. So, probably the coolest thing about this puzzle is how normal it is. You've almost certainly solved it before, as it appears in a lot of video games. I learned about it in a PC game called Black and White that I played when I was younger. It's historically called the Tower of Hanoi. I just flipped it on its side, which helps make it difficult to understand the rules. Essentially, you have a 4-level pyramid built on a stake. It needs to remain on a stake, and you need to move it. You can only move one piece at a time, and they have to stack biggest to smallest, so you can't put the top under the bottom. I saw this puzzle and converted it. It is possibly the most satisfying puzzle I've made. Keep that in mind. You find a fun puzzle in another game, steal it. All I did was turn it on its side, and it's suddenly baffling. So they all start in the top position and must get into the down position. It's a natural urge when you see the puzzle, so I didn't really need to tell anyone what the goal of the puzzle was. They do not know the rules to the puzzle, though, so they may attempt to move a switch, and I either say, that switch can move up, down, skips in the middle, or cannot move at all. The rules to the puzzle are super simple. No switch can move if there is currently a switch to its left. That is, any distance to its left, not just immediately to its left. A switch also cannot move into a position where there would already be a switch to its left. It's pretty easy, but only because I know the rules. I've tested it on many people. The quickest get it in under 5 minutes, but many may take 30 minutes to an hour. Once folk know the rules, it's much easier. Even after the puzzle is completed, other players may want to try it. Awesome. Let's say the group can't figure it out. You have a lot of options. 1. Let them know the rules. 2. Let them cheat. I ran the puzzle, but I also had the option of attempting a Thieves' Tool test, DC 25, to force a switch or altogether remove one. If they fail by 5 or more, they take 1d6 electrical damage for every 5 they fail it by. They tried this exactly once. It was fun, but then they tried doing it normally and got it. Theoretically, if the group were greedy, they could have tried to remove the switches to harvest them, as they were made of mithril. The glass orb. I like this idea, but my implementation was not as cool as I would have liked it to be. This is a glass sphere, balanced on an immovable rod. Inside it is sovereign glue, not quite set, around another glass sphere with another immovable rod in its center. Suspended in the sovereign glue are swirls of color. They're actually shrieking fungus spores, keyed to a particular wavelength of light. Also in the room are 3 metal blossoms, shutters for a lens. When the switch puzzle is completed, they open and plugs extrude into the room above with the telescope. When the correct color light shines through them and the swirls inside the sphere are unswirled, the pitch of the fungus would resonate perfectly to shatter glass. Neat idea. It relies on Taylor-Coët flow in the sovereign glue, an idea that I outright robbed from Smarter Every Day. There's a link to his video in the doobly-doo. The big change is that my system has an omnidirectional spin, which could allow somebody to write something in it. That phrase is either a code phrase or, in my case, an aphorism that the person kept out would never dare write. Since the door to the kept out place is sealed with a glass obstacle in the way of the door rotating open, this prevents entry unless shattered sonically. If someone had shatter, they may very well bypass that puzzle. The door itself is weighted such that it would spin and release a latch if the glass obstacle was removed, allowing it to swing freely. In practice, my players didn't read the language. None of them could. The one who did barely looked at it, and there was no real chance to let that cool thing happen. Boo. Instead, it ended up being relegated to a simple sleight of hand check, and that's, I don't know, it lacked the oomph that I wanted. It does its job of reaffirming the kind of minds that built this place, but it didn't really seem that fun to me for my players. So they followed the visible path, and it's done. What I do like about it is that continuing on prevents them from getting the immovable rods. Easily, anyway. I didn't know how hard sovereign glue is to break in 5e. I thought alcohol dissolved it, to be honest, but apparently only oil of etherealness and universal solvent can bypass it. Whoops! Still, neat. If the players tried to remove the rod first, well, the orb would fall and be ruined, meaning they would have to find another way in or ignore that path altogether. I like that. Some choices. But overall, I wish they knew the language, or I had a better physical representation, or maybe even showed them the video from Smarter Every Day. The occultation. Alright, this is a bunch of wordy stuff. I already covered this a bit in Campaign Log 3 Tub Thumping. It's basically a bunch of info. Players pick through what they think is important, and we see. For the duration of the occultation of the observer, I set an hourglass. Eventually, if it takes too long, the occultation of the observer would end. If that happens, well, too late. The puzzle is insolvable until the next occultation. At least in theory. I would probably give the okay if they figured out the colors correctly and produced enough light to convince me. Fine, I'd give it to them. That said, if you have a puzzle keyed on cosmic events, it really is in your hands as GM to arbitrate when that cosmic event occurs again. Then there was the note. This was a simple Caesar shift. It's the note Carthal found in his pocket from his stolen jacket. It translates to the below, a hint of bigger things happening in the world. The standing stones are moving. First they get together, but soon the boulders will roll. The field was not always gleaming. It was once rough and scraggy. Arnold. Not much to say there. It's cryptic, and to be honest, I don't want to detail everything. It'll come up later in the game. Warning. Spoiler for a future campaign log here. Puzzles of the Tower of Lycanthropy. These are proper test puzzles. They are meant to teach lessons by the designer that made them in the game. I'm cool with that. Why have puzzles if not reasonable for them to exist in the game? There are 2 parts of each of these puzzles. 1 to get up onto the stand, and 2 to activate the wolf statue. Theoretically, all the getting up could be sidestepped by flying or climbing. That's fine. Sometimes that happens. Most of the solutions in this temple are simple, though a bit strange. This is a temple of lycanthropy, and the lessons they teach are lessons the sorts who value lycanthropy would teach. Teamwork, support, intimacy, and feeding. Each of these is in a room marked with an instruction. Above each is also a wolf. To get to the wolf, you need to be able to get up in the room. Then you need to get each wolf to howl. Work together. The puzzle is just a series of platform pressure plates. Stepping on one raises the next, but only if the last person was stepping on the one prior. To get to the top of the building, you either need to altogether bypass this, or have 4 folks, 1 on each button. Each of the puzzles is designed to need 1 fewer person than the last. Part 2. To get the wolf to howl, you need to stand on the plate next to it and howl. It will not howl if you are not also howling. Raise each other. To get up to the upper level on this one, it's just much too high. You need to climb up. There's an easy method, a tower of 3 folks. Otherwise, however you climb can work. Part 2 is activating the wolf. On top is a windlass that lifts a wolf statue to the height of the others. If completed, it begins to howl. Love each other. This puzzle is definitely the strangest of them. Wolves have certain values, and among them is working together, raising each other, and the other 2 most commonly associated are mating and feeding. The puzzle has a thermo-electrically conductive floor, kinda like an enameled mood ring. It requires the bare skin of 2 separate people to be in contact with it, in a way that it reads as intimate. Proximity or entwining limbs are important, but it may be possible to fool. When completed, a fold-out ladder protrudes from the ceiling. Part 2. The wolf has the same thermo-electrically conductive enameling on its back. It will howl when embraced with bare skin. Feed. The final room. This room has a single mouse in a cage in it. A ladder will fold down if you place the mouse in your mouth. It will not if the mouse dies. If the mouse dies or leaves the room, it respawns in the cage. Part 2. To make the final wolf howl, the mouse must be placed in the wolf statue's mouth. When you do, it clamps down. When all wolves howl simultaneously, a sonic beam pours forth from each, revealing an octagram on the altar. If this occurs and there is a person within the octagram, they are polymorphed into a wolf for 24 hours, or until reduced to 0 HP. If the person in the octagram engages in a savage or predatory act while being transformed, they can be afflicted with lycanthropy, permanently. Neat stuff. Potentially useful, but potentially dangerous too. I like it. In retrospect, though, maybe a little too powerful, but mostly because lycanthropy is weirdly strong in 5th ed. Mundane weapon damage immunity is really intense at low levels. Alright, so I also have this cool concept of attuning to and unlocking the fancy parts of magic items being something of a puzzle. I have a few of these planned, some less so than others. I have very specific magic items in my mind, but I'd like to save some of my secrets. A particular warlock-specific item may require a sacrifice to your patron to fully unlock its powers. An artifact related to the planes or the heavens may require you to go to a particular planar location, or possibly even die and be resurrected. Some of these have multiple stages of unlocking. One is a blank scroll from an ancient monastery with 4 lessons. Lessons in focus, karma, determination, and emptiness. You learn karma if you throw a fit about trying to read or utilize it, which causes it to whip through the air and litter your skin with paper cuts. Focus works when you read the text through the silk band that wraps around it. Determination must be read with ethereal sight or see invisibility. And finally, emptiness is revealed when you attempt to destroy the scroll, revealing an indestructible framework beneath. If any of that sounds cool to you, I'm working on a setting guide for the world of Aftermath. I'll release some of my notes ahead of time on my Patreon if folks are interested. There you can find some of my custom magic items, some scenarios, and some of the notes I have going forward. If you have any cool puzzles I should know about, let me hear them. I'm super excited for more. I find puzzles to be one of the most interesting world-building elements that I definitely also have the hardest time producing. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, elect to receive notifications. There will be more to come your way. If you want to see more of this content or to help me elevate the quality of the channel, you're welcome to support me on Patreon. That would be very cool. Until next week, have fun.